Welcome to the Money Puzzle. I'm Brian Ramsey. That is Eric Douglas there. And today, would you get the okay sign or what was it?
No, I was just saying hello.
Oh, saying hello. All right.
That's all I was doing.
All right. So this is an interesting one. So what we try to do during this podcast is really we sit down every week and say, well, what is it that people are talking about when they come in here? And then we sort of generate ideas for the podcast on that. Or if somebody sends us, a comment to say, hey, talk about this subject, we'll do that. Mm-hmm. But this one actually came from clients that have been coming in or prospective clients, because we do a TV show as well. And so we get a lot of folks coming in from the TV show, and they're not current clients. And so we get all kinds of wild questions and wild topics that people want to talk about. But there is, I'd say over the last couple of weeks, we've figured out there is sort of a common theme that we're hearing, especially from our TV callers. Would you not agree with that?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so that common theme is that when someone comes in, they're nervous about the market, especially where the markets are today. We're not going to go down that road and talk about how awful they are or whether there's a recession or inflation or whatever.
We've beaten that horse to death already.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But this leads to it. So it is important that when markets are kind of wonky, you have a tendency to start asking around what you should be doing about retirement topics, what you should do about investment topics, about refinancing your mortgage or buying a house or buying a car, whatever. It just has a tendency to reach out. And so we get a lot of folks that are coming in from the TV show, and they start telling us, oh, well, I'm doing this or I'm doing that or I'm contributing to this. And we go, well, where did this come from? How did this strategy come about? And what do they say?
Well, they asked their neighbor or they asked a friend or
they
talked to someone else. And part of, why this also came up too is because we were talking about this earlier and, we started noticing, obviously we're seeing some more clients come in the door or prospects, I should say, come in the door that have never worked with anyone before. But usually there's a non-linear path that prospective clients take before they ever even enter our office. So one thing I've noticed a couple different things. I've noticed a funny little graphic that I thought really put into perspective what I've been seeing lately. If you have an issue with your back, where do you go? You call a doctor, right? If you're going to build a building, who do you call? You call an architect. If you're going to go get advice, law advice or anything, any kind of guidance as it pertains to, to the law, you call a lawyer. What we have found traditionally, and this is, and I also started seeing this in some Facebook DIY groups. I went down a rabbit hole one day through looking at Facebook DIY groups.
By the way.
Yeah, I go down rabbit holes sometimes, but I was going down these rabbit holes of Facebook DIY groups where all these people get together and they're just asking random questions, and none of it's just maybe it's moderated by people in the industry, but you're not seeing people with questions about financial planning or looking for financial advice go to financial advisors. They go to their neighbors. They go to CNBC. They go to Dave Ramsey. They go to, what's the other lady you see on TV? The name is escaping me.
Yes. Susie Orman.
They go to Susie Orman, right? They go to all these different places, and none of these people are really qualified to give advice to anyone's in particular situation. Right. They do everything they can to get advice from someone who is not really professionally licensed or acting as a fiduciary that's qualified to give advice in their best interest, and so that's why that's part of the reason we came up with this topic of conversation today. So I don't know if you want me to expand on it or if you want to expand on it yourself, but it's just been interesting to see that and we talk about this a lot. If and this is an example that Chris was giving as well. Even further than that, because it's one thing to go talk to your neighbor who may be an accountant, but and this is going to go back to that doctor analogy earlier, if you're having an issue with your knee, you don't go see a cardiac surgeon. You go see an orthopedic specialist, right? You go see someone who's specifically who's specifically able to handle whatever issue that you have. Just as accountants serve a valuable place in our world, and we work with obviously a number of CPAs, just as estate planning lawyers have a place in our industry as well, but they don't do the exact same thing that we do. That doesn't mean they're necessarily qualified to answer the same types of questions that we are qualified to answer.
Yeah, and here's another little interesting tidbit on that piece, and that is, I would 100% agree with you, right? We've talked about this over and over. But the one thing that is really interesting is that most of the referrals we get are they're not clients, are clients that have asked our clients, hey, I'm looking for a financial advisor. Who would you refer me to? That's different, right, than going to your neighbor and saying, hey, what are you doing about Social Security? When did you take Social Security? Which is the one I got this week. They literally went to their neighbor and said, when did you take Social Security? Well, I took it at 62. Okay, well, that's next year for me. I'm going to take it at 62. And they come in and it's like, why in the world would you do that? You're still working. Why would you even, that's a whole different, that's a different, speaking of rabbit holes, we can go down a rabbit hole on that one. But that's the point is, you can certainly ask, and I'll give you an example. I tore my foot up. I'm not going to tell you how. It was really stupid on my part. But I did. I tore my ankle up pretty good. And I called a friend of mine and said, who do you think I ought to go see? I'm still going to see a foot specialist. But I just asked somebody for a referral on who they should go see. I didn't ask that person, who is a doctor, by the way. I didn't say, well, what do you think about my foot? I didn't say that. I said, who should I go see about this? And he sent me to a foot specialist. So that's the point. And I think that's the point we're trying to get across with this topic is it's okay to ask who you should go see. It's another thing to actually ask an expert for that. No different than you know that person.
I do know that person, yes.
Just out of the corner of my house, somebody walking down the house.
My wife was walking.
Yeah, he knows that person. But again, that's the point is when you're talking about finances, you cannot ask your neighbor about your particular situation because that advice they're giving you is based on their experience. It's not based on your particular situation, your experience.
Funny story. So a client of mine I talked to, I guess it's been about a couple months now, was telling me, hey, I have someone want you to talk to. Is it okay if I give them your name and number? Yeah, absolutely. It was an old colleague of his because my client retired last year. I'd actually been working with him about 2 years prior to him actually retiring, and we did a wealth of retirement planning ahead of time. So he's well prepared, and we did all that stuff, right? So he's comfortable, he's good to go. And an old colleague of his is actually in the same boat, same company, same type of situation, very similar type of situation. That individual had gone to my client and asked, for help. Hey, what was it that you did? My client specifically told him, this is who I talked to. This is who I worked with. Right. He helped me. Here is his information. I talked to my client about a month later, and he was like, I won't say his name, but did so-and-so ever call you? Yeah. I was like, no, actually he didn't. You want to give me his number? And he gave me his number. But he said, why didn't he? He's like, that idiot. He was supposed to have called you by now. Yeah. He doesn't know what he's doing. Right. I told him to call you, and he hasn't called you yet. Yeah. And so it's kind of funny, his reaction, because he knows that his buddy is not qualified to do it himself. He knew that he wasn't qualified to do it himself either. Yeah. This is someone who does not work in the finance industry, a completely separate industry, right? But he did well for himself, and I would imagine his colleague has done pretty well for himself as well. But it was interesting because I still haven't heard from his friend. Yeah. I even called and left him a couple of messages, and I still haven't heard from that referral yet. So it's interesting the number of people that still, even after they've been told they need to go talk to someone, still have that hesitancy to actually go and do it.
Right. Yeah, and what also we have found is I'll tell you what's been really super interesting is we meet prospective clients in several different venues. We do adult literacy programs, financial literacy programs. That is a sort of a different experience with us because it's either a night or 2 nights of a program. We're talking about financial planning. We're talking about different aspects of planning and how we address it or what's the common mistakes we see clients make. That's one version. We also have the TV show, which is really a 30-minute topic that we do. We get into some detail, not a lot of detail, because typically when we're doing our financial adult literacy programs, those can be 2 hours, 6 hours, depending on what type program we're doing. But in a 30-minute TV show, we're typically talking about a topic and keeping it super high level. So we get folks that call in from there. And what's interesting is we'll ask them, of course we ask them how they got to us and all that good stuff. And we ask them what their concerns are, what are they there for. They give us a list of, hey, this is what I'm looking for. Sometimes they said, well, I'm already taking Social Security. Okay, well, how'd you make that decision? Or here's how I'm investing my assets. Well, how'd you make that decision? Contributing to a 529 plan. Well, what prompted you to do that?
Yeah.
How much are you putting in there? Is there a reason behind all that? We want to find out what's going on up there that's caused them to do this. And what's interesting is, I'll bet you if we go back and ask, when you for example, do you mow your own yard? Well, some people are going to say yes. Some people are going to say no. Okay, well, what'd you do? Well, I called around. I got a referral. And I have called that person and said, hey, come in and, and mow my yard or do my landscaping or whatever. Same thing with a dentist. Same thing with a primary care physician. All the things that we know. An auto mechanic. How did you select to put tires on your car or brake? And all those are really, in the grand scheme of things, small decisions. But we're talking about managing your largest asset you'll ever have in your entire life and managing of your largest expense you're ever going to have during your lifetime, which is taxes. And you don't go to an expert for that, but you'll go to an expert to mow your yard, or you go to an expert to put tires on your car. I mean, again, it just goes back to the little things that people focus attention on to call an expert, but yet the most expensive or the biggest expense, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, and managing the largest asset you're ever going to have throughout your lifetime. And a lot of people don't reach out to an expert for help.
They'll reach out to their neighbor, or they'll go to a Facebook group and ask a bunch of other people in the same category as themselves, a bunch of other consumers and ultimately, and going back to that Facebook group rabbit hole I went down, I'm watching some of these answers to some of these questions that people are posing, and I'm like just shuddering in disbelief. Like, these people are not qualified to be giving advice, and most of the advice that they're giving are just not very good.
Well, so a perfect example, as we were discussing the topic for the show, Chris, our other partner, had said that he had a new client. I think it was new, right? I think, it was new. A new client had come in, and he got advice. I don't remember exactly if it was from an advisor or somebody else. He was turning 65, and he needed for Medicare. He was told that he could sign up for Medicare, let's say at the end of the month, after he turned 65.
He was told it was up to 3 months after he turned 65.
And now that client has been uninsured and has applied now. But he went through a point where he was uninsured, which now there's a penalty that client or that person will pay for the rest of his life through Medicare because he didn't get proper advice. Again, I don't know where he got the advice. I forgot what Chris said. But that's one of those things that, again, if you're working with a good, solid advisor and you plan well in advance, we have those conversations with clients to say it's 3 months prior to you turning 65.
Yeah, not 3 months
after. That's why you do it 3 months prior, so you don't pay the penalty.
And I hate to say it too. I mean, it's also a function of just so much bad press about what we do or our industry as a whole that I think makes people reticent to reach out in the first place and get advice, or maybe not even trust the advice that they're going to get because you hear so much conflicting information. We've done episodes about this, about the financial news media and all the stuff that they are out there. They're out there selling product because you have insurance companies and other mutual fund companies, and they're all buying advertising on these TV stations. So they're going to put out certain agenda items, right? And it's going to be bad news all the time, and most of the news is going to be catered to traders, not investors. So it's going to be different types of advice, and it's just there's so much you can read and get into if you're trying to do it yourself. The problem is you don't understand what's qualified for you or what's going to be the best advice for your specific situation. And that's where, coming to us or someone like us who understands how to apply all of that information out there and apply it to your specific situation in a way that's going to be most conducive and most efficient for your specific situation.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. I couldn't have said it any better. Again, the purpose of this conversation is really just to say if you're trying to seek financial advice from a neighbor, from a colleague, from anybody else that's not what they do for a living, you're setting yourself up for failure. Look, you can do a lot of DIY stuff. You can Google search all you want, but I can promise you if you do that, nothing out there is going to be able to tell you. You have to make sure that all these ducks fit in a row, or all your puzzle pieces, if you will, sort of fit together. They'll tell you all your puzzle pieces, but they're never going to tell you how all those puzzle pieces fit together. Another perfect example is, and I'll make this super quick, But we had a client that called and said, hey, I'm 2 years away from retirement. What do we do? And I'm like, okay, ball game totally changes. We were focused on your accumulation phase of life. Now we're getting to the income phase of life. And we have a very specific process we walk through about 2 years before you retire. We have to set things in place so that, and I won't get into it today. That's another conversation for another podcast. And after we got off the phone, she was like, I feel so much better knowing that there is something that you guys put in place and that I don't have to worry about money when I get into retirement for at least the first 15 years. And I'm like, well, absolutely. We just never talked about it because we weren't to that point yet. And that's another thing that if you Google search, they're never going to tell you 12 to 24 months before retirement, you need to start putting things in place so that when you retire, you flip a switch and all of a sudden you're in the income phase.
Retirement planning, the distribution phase of your retirement is a completely different topic, a completely different animal from the accumulation phase, like you just said. Accumulation phase, I don't want to say it's easy. It's not easy. You definitely still need a plan, but it's a lot less nuanced. You put away as much money as you possibly can, you invest it and leave it alone and let it grow. There you go. That's the accumulation phase. It's an entirely different animal when you actually start taking distributions and start paying yourself, start receiving an income from the investments that you established during the accumulation phase. And there's so many different ways to go about creating those income streams. It's just a matter of what's going to be most optimal for your specific situation. And there's not a lot of DIY stuff out there that's going to really steer you in the right direction.
Yep. So. All right, that's it for another week. Again, purpose of this was just to say seek the advice of a professional. That's about as plain and simple as we can get it. And if you want to come see us, come see us. Ms. Producer is going to put our information on the screen. You're more than welcome to call us. You can go to our website, sign up for a complimentary meeting. We do that for everybody. Come in and kind of kick the tires, ask questions, bring us your concerns, and say, how would you guys address it? We're happy to walk you down that path. And if you like what you hear, you can do business with us. So that's it for another week. I'll let Eric sign us off. And just make sure you tune in each and every week because we do produce content every week. We also have a bourbon podcast that we produce. That goes out on Fridays, so make sure you tune into that. That's probably our biggest following is the Bourbon Podcast. And then we also have a TV show that comes out, check your local listings, because that may be changing channels very soon. So that's it.
Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you are listening, we would greatly appreciate it as well if you actually go to our YouTube channel. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you're actually subscribing to receive our content. And if you're listening to us on podcast, go find us. Go look up The Money Puzzle on YouTube. Pretty easy to find us, and make sure you're subscribing to our content there. One, you'll be the first to see any new content that we drop, but it definitely helps us get the word out to other people that might be able to benefit from anything that we have to say here within our ramblings here in the office. So once again, appreciate you listening. Appreciate you watching. See you next time.
The information given herein is taken from sources that IFP Advisors, LLC, doing business as Independent Financial Partners, IFP, IFP Securities, doing business as IFP, and its advisors believed to be reliable, but it is not guaranteed by us as to accuracy or completeness. This is for informational purposes only, and in no event should be construed as an offer to sell or solicitation of an offer to buy any securities or products. Please consult your tax and/or legal advisor before implementing any tax and/or legal related strategies mentioned in this publication, as IFP does not provide tax and/or legal advice. Opinions expressed are subject to change without notice and do not take into account the particular investment objectives, financial situation, or needs of individual investors. This report may not be reproduced, distributed, or published by any person for any purpose without IFP's express prior written consent. Securities offered through IFP Securities, LLC, doing business as Independent Financial Partners, IFP, member of FINRA and SIPC. Investment advice offered through IFP Advisors, doing business as IFP, a registered investment advisor. IFP and Family Wealth Planning Partners are not affiliated. The information given herein is taken from sources that IFP Advisors, LLC, doing business as IFP, IFP Securities, LLC, doing business as IFP, and its advisors believed to be reliable, but it is not guaranteed by us as to accuracy or completeness. This is for informational purposes only, and in no event should be construed as an offer to sell or solicitation of an offer to buy any securities or products. Please consult your tax and or legal advisor before implementing any tax and or legal related strategies mentioned in this publication, as IFP does not provide tax and or legal advice. Opinions expressed are subject to change without notice and do not take into account the particular investment objectives, financial situation, or needs of individual investors.